I have to just make sure that I'm on screen.
You're good. Do we have people streaming right now?
We do have people that are streaming, so.
Wait a minute, Greg, to get started, so we have some.
Well, it's a speech for. Wait a minute.
We didn't, but I don't have to go there. You streaming a moment. Busy times. Martin, tell me when you need to. And it's the microphone on.
Yeah, we'll give it a minute pass, so
Okay.
I think people might just be dialing in now, still. It's like the pandemic. I think.
Sunday, we have something else in our house. Mondays, it's tomorrows.
And then. I have to take anything. Yeah. You.
Required him to go.
You can get the food.
It's like bones to speak.
Possible at night. You can go in the house. Listen to.
Yep.
Yeah.
Martin, tell me.
Yes, we did.
Okay. Do you want me to? Yes. Is the mic on? Is this on? Testing. Ta-da. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. We're going to get started here. We are live streaming this event this evening, so welcome to the parents and families that are joining us virtually. There will be a Q&A after the presentation, so if you're joining us online, please feel free to type your questions into the chat and we will read them out. Tommy Adams, our head of school, is with the fourth graders in Mackinac for the field trip, so he asked me to introduce our special guest this evening. My name is Sarah Goff. I am the GPA parent of the fourth grader. I'm the current chair of the Academy Fund. I'm a board member of Kevin Song, the local nonprofit for suicide prevention, and I helped organize the mental wellness week. As part of Mental Wellness Week, GPA introduced a series of activities and events this week. On Monday, we had special guest speakers to our lower and middle school students that taught them how to overcome obstacles, how to be resilient, and how to ignite their passion. We had therapy dogs as well on campus during the recesses. Everybody loves that, kids and teachers. And the entire school has had workshops on mindfulness, yoga and meditation, journaling, and art and music therapy sessions, just to name a few. Our special guest, Anne Moigis, is from Center Pointe Counseling, and we'll talk about the importance of giving our children the tools to help them cope with stress and anxiety, how we can support them, and signs to look for and when to seek professional help. Anne is a trained therapist with over 20 years of experience working with children. She emphasizes empathetic listening, breathwork strategies, and mindfulness-based practices. Please help me welcome Anne Moigis.
you so much, Sarah. I appreciate everyone's attention. I appreciate everyone being here this evening. I just wanted to give a little bit more about my background before I get started. Sarah had mentioned I have a practice on Lincoln and Mac, actually, in the Grosse Pointe area. And I do a lot of mindfulness-based work. I have special training in that. I'm also a certified trauma and resilience trainer. So actually, prior to starting my private practice, I was training staff members at my former district. I worked in a school setting in trauma-informed practices. So I'm going to be referring back to that experience a little bit during this presentation. I'm also an EMDR therapist, so I'm going to kind of go through maybe some things to look for, if that would be helpful with your student or yourself. I'm a big fan of EMDR therapy, so I'm going to go through a little bit what's entailed with that and just give you a little bit of information on it. So topics for this evening, and they might seem to kind of go all over the place, but in my mind, they link together very clearly. So it's my intention this evening to kind of help you guys see the links throughout this presentation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about brain stress response in a simplified way to explain to kids and adults. I kind of like to refer back to it myself when I'm thinking about something that makes me stressed out. I'm going to talk about the universal needs of all people and how that translates into student behavior sometimes. So when a student has an unmet need, sometimes they will act to get this need met. So I'm going to talk about some of those universal needs and kind of how that translates. One of those needs is independence. So I'm going to talk about how emotional regulation is tied to this. Then I'd like to give you 3 tools to kind of take home, some strategies to help with stress relief. And I'm going to talk a little bit about little T trauma and how to recognize it in behavior. So this is a very simplified way of thinking about the brain. Make this into an anatomy lesson, but if you think about the brain, our brain, the prefrontal cortex is the part that we need for school. So this part is all about language, logic, lists, everything that you need for school. Where the more primitive part is about sensory, colors, daydreaming, rhythm, stuff that doesn't make sense. So when you explain the function of how the brain responds to a kid, sometimes you can do this by using 3 animal examples. And I learned this through my training start. And so the meerkat, that's this guy right here, that's like the amygdala. And meerkat's always looking for danger. So when the meerkat senses danger, it will wake up the other 2 animals in the brain. So the primitive brain is like the tiger. And so when the tiger is doing well, it's sleeping, eating, it's playing with other tigers. But when the meerkat wakes up the tiger, it goes into fight. So in the classroom, this might look like your desk, or in the classroom, arguing with the teacher, getting into a scuffle with another student. So when the tiger is up, the owl flies away. So the owl is associated with logic and reason, but a lot of people tend to do in those kind of situations is try and think their way through those difficult emotions, but you don't have command language at that time when you're dealing with the stressor scenes. So the best thing to do when the owl is gone is to do a sensory-based intervention first, wait for your owl to fly back, and then figure out what you're gonna do. So just kind of reflecting on my experience when I worked at a lot of different places, and so I worked in an elementary setting, and I worked with adults for a while. I worked a lot in a high school. This work primarily with experience, recent experience within the high school. So I constantly hear, hey, this kid's upset, can you talk to this student? This kid's upset, can you talk to them? And it might have been like a girlfriend broke up with a boyfriend, or who knows, there's a lot of action all the time. So when I talk to them, they're going through, in the middle of the stress response, the outcome of the conversation wasn't as good as when I started doing different sensory-based interventions in my room prior to kind of reframing the situation. So I started doing these breathwork strategies in my office, and then once they were back in balance, then we would have the conversation and kind of reframe and figure out like how we're going to kind of solve this event. And the outcomes were much better with that. And actually, right before I left, I was kind of setting rooms up in my school so that I can have kind of multiple kids kind of allow themselves to have their owl fly back. So rather than say something that would get them in trouble with a teacher, they might do a drawing or do something so that it's out on a piece of paper instead of like saying it to the teacher's face. So it worked out much better for the students. And my conversations were much more productive if I did things that way. So when the owl flies back, reframe, and I just want to say, kids are still responsible for their actions and their behavior, but it's important that we kind of listen to where they're coming from. So this by no means that there's no consequences associated with behavior, but just kind of giving them the time to recoup can just make a world of difference. So kind of going into the brain science to the universal needs of all people. So this again was kind of touched on in my Star Commonwealth training. There are 4 universal needs: belonging, mastery, independence, and generosity. So if these needs aren't met, kids are going to seek out ways to get these needs met. So belonging, I'm not going to go through all of these because the focus of my presentation is on independence, but belonging, I think Brene Brown says that belonging is different than fitting in, and that fitting in, you change who you are to kind of make things work where you are, where belonging is you're just yourself and you're accepted for who you are. So an example of this in the school system would be, and I know that they have these, they have leaders, and you find these leaders from different places in the school. Like some kids are the theater kids, some kids are the athletes. So just from all walks of life, and you pair those students up with the incoming freshmen. And so that all kids feel like, yeah, there's some place that I belong. Like, I'm not going to belong everywhere. I can identify at least one that I can kind of feel like myself when I'm living. And that's kind of the purpose of some of these programs in school. And so there's some great ones, and Link Crew is a great one. Mastery. So everyone has to feel like they're good at least one thing. Right? So if they don't feel like they're good at least one thing, it's going to cause problems in the behavior. So it might not be everything. It might be that they're good, like they have good penmanship, or they're a good athlete, whatever it is. We got to help kids find, at least one thing that they feel like they're really good at. And then generosity, giving back. You see this a lot in schools where they pair the older students with the younger students and kind of talk to them about the things that they learned, and that gives them a sense like, okay, I can give back to younger students. This fosters that sense of generosity. The last one we're going to talk about is independence. So with independence, kind of the subcategories to that are self-regulation techniques, self-efficacy and self-discipline. So we all want our kids to be leaders. We want them to stick to difficult tasks. We want them to have perseverance. But it kind of starts with the ability to regulate themselves emotionally. Because if they're not able to regulate themselves emotionally independently, that I feel like that's kind of like the building block for those other elements of independence. And so in order to help kids to regulate independently, what are your child's natural coping strategies? So sometimes I ask kids this, and they look at me like I'm crazy. I don't know what they are. Like, I have no idea. I've never thought about it. So, and I have conversations too with like other people that I've worked with, and I think it's different for kids growing up these days. And this presentation is not about the pandemic, and it's not about technology. I know that there's hopefully a million other presentations out there that, you know, during the pandemic, kids relied on technology. And I think a lot of times when kids feel out of balance, that's the first thing that they turn to. So you and I grew up in a different age. So tree, or read, you know, kids still do these things, but a lot of kids will turn to the technology. It's not necessarily like, oh, kids were online or everything in the pandemic, and so it's kind of difficult, I think, sometimes to kind of just kind of break away from it and think about what it is that helps you feel better, right? So when you're talking to kids about different coping strategies, I just want to say, like, a lot of people say, like, gosh, like, I'm a baseball player, dance, and these after school activities are great, but you can't like do a dance in the middle of your algebra lesson when the teacher calls on you and you don't know the answer. And you can't hit baseballs when a kid says something that gets under your skin. So for this reason, I want to teach strategies in my office that you can do immediately and you can do anytime. So that's kind of what I focus on. So the biggest thing with this, when you're teaching strategies with your kids, is that you have to check yourself first before you tell them to do it, because kids pick up on the energy of your nervous system. So if you are regulated yourself, and it's best to kind of get that reeled in before you say, hey, you want to practice your strategies. And so I think all of us kind of take a look at what are the self-care strategies that we have in place for ourselves. And because the way you say something is way more important than the content that you say. And I think that a lot of us as parents, we want to have these perfect responses from kids. Well, this book told me to say this, and this book told me to say that. But really, the most important thing is that, you know, they feel heard, they feel that you understand, and they feel that they can come to you. So here's some of my favorite strategies that I like to teach. So coping strategy number 1 is mindfulness of sound. And so when I think of mindfulness of sound, I will do sometimes in my office with younger kids. And what we're kind of trying to do with this is we're bringing our minds back to present moment. And so when you're taught thinking that's mostly future focused, it's kind of like, you gotta do this, I gotta do that, you're gonna do this, you know, make you nervous, make you anxious. Whereas, like, sometimes if you're caught in the past, it can turn into this, what I could have, should have, I shouldn't have said this, I did this wrong, oops, you know. And so that can make you mad, that can make you sad. So when you feel yourself start to slip, what you're trying to do is bring yourself back to present awareness
right now, we are to do this. Right now, so I remember being a kid, like in high school, and had stuff to do after school, just like all the kids now. And sometimes I noticed that it was really bad, and I'd wake up my dad. And my mom was usually, she was just like, there's no way I was waking her up. But what he would usually do is he would crack open my window and tell me to listen to the crickets. And so now they have all these apps out there where you can listen to all the sounds. But it worked every time because I would focus on the sound and then it calmed down my sensory brain and it wasn't thinking of my to-do list and I would fall asleep. So in my office, I will just even have kids, if they're little kids, like I'll have them sit in my office and say, what do you hear right now? Like, what do you hear around you? The air conditioner going. Oh, I hear the car outside. So this is what you can do if you lose focus in the classroom. At least you can listen to different sounds, wait for your owl to fly back. And then you're good to go. The next strategy is finding your anchor spot. So much like a anchor, when you throw it into the water, you still blow around, but you don't blow around the sun, right? So your breath can also do that for you. So in order to find your anchor spot, I would invite you for a moment to just take a couple moments and breathe normally. I'm going to give you guys a second to do that. And then I would like you to assess, where do you feel that in your body? Where do you feel your inhale and your exhale? So most people will report that they feel their inhale and exhale either in their nostrils, their chest, or their belly. So wherever you feel your inhale and exhale most prominently is where you're going to focus your attention during stress response. And so you focus your attention on your belly. For kids, it's their belly, which is great. Those glorious bellies, right? And then you kind of wait for your, staying in on the spot. Okay, so this last strategy is the cyclic sigh. And I don't know if but he is actually a professor at Stanford and he has a podcast and there's all this great stuff that he presents on. And I like the thing I like about him is that he breaks down things so clearly, even like super high level things. So he's going to explain this breathwork technique way better than I could. And it's about 3 minutes. And so I'm just going to have him kind of explain it here.
So when my laboratory got interested in studying strength in humans, we asked ourselves, what are the patterns of breathing that allow for rapid reduction of stress? And more importantly, what are the patterns of breathing in real time so that people can adjust their stress while they're still engaging in it? Like breathwork classes, running off the facility for the weekend is a magical experience, but life can be feel stressed. It is still true that vacation, long vacation retreats, and massages, or a drink, if you're a drinking age, still work, but they're slow and taking. The physiological side of the pattern of breathing was actually discovered by physiologists in the 30s, and that is essentially rediscovered from the Jack Feldman, expert in neurobiology and recreation, and then who studies lung function. The physiological side is a pattern of breathing that we all engage in deep sleep when levels of carbon dioxide can get too high. We, or our will do a double inhale followed by extended. Children or adults that are stopping and lose their breath, so to speak, will also do a double inhale. That's the spontaneous execution of what we call the physiological side. The reason it works so well to relax that is because it offloads a lot of carbon dioxide into the lungs. And the way it works is the following. Our lungs are not just keep bags of air. We have all these little millions of sacs of air. And if you're really flat, as big as a tennis court or something. The volume of air everywhere, I mean, volume is tremendously high, except that we get stressed for some reason to go up in the stream, and it's kind of a double whammy, these little sacs of fluid. Now, when we do a double inhale, so I'll do this now, twice through the inhale, so you can do this, or you could do it with your mouth, and you can inhale, and then you sneak a little. When you do that, you reinflate those little sacs, and when you exhale, then you discard all the carbon dioxide at once. So the simple way to describe this protocol is that unless you are underwater, you do a double inhale followed by an extended exhale, and you offload the maximum amount of carbon dioxide. And we found in this laboratory, and other laboratories have found that just 1, 2, or 3 of those physiological signs brings your level of stress down very, very fast. And it's a tool that you can use anytime. I do think that people kind of watch other people or dogs as they start to relax or go down to sleep. You'll see this pattern of breathing, but again, it can be consciously driven. The other thing about breathing and the reason why exhales are so vital is the following. I know there's a lot of interest nowadays in heart rate variability. Well, most people don't realize this, but your breathing is actually driving heart rate variability. So when you inhale, this dome-shaped muscle beneath your lungs, your diaphragm, actually moves down. As the lungs expand, it moves down. When you do that, you create more space in the thoracic cavity, and the heart gets a little bigger, it actually expands. As a consequence, blood flows more slowly through that larger volume, and the brain quickly sends a signal down to the heart to speed the heart up. The short, simple version of this is inhales speed the heart up. When you exhale, the opposite is true. That dome-shaped muscle, the diaphragm, moves up. The space in your thoracic cavity gets a little bit smaller. The heart gets a little bit smaller. Blood moves more quickly through that small volume, and the brain sends a signal to the heart to slow the heart down. Physicians know this as respiratory sinus arrhythmia, but this is the basis of what we call HRV, heart rate variability. And the simple way to remember this is anytime you emphasize exhales, in other words, making them longer than your inhales, you are slowing the heart rate down, you're calming your system. Anytime you emphasize inhales, you make them more vigorous or longer than your exhales, you're speeding up your heart.
So actually, so he says you can do this proactively and reactively. So if you want to do this with him, and maybe just put this on for just a couple, like just real short, you can do it guided with him. Kind of hold on. 5 minutes worth. That's good for that. But I like that because you can do it proactively, and you can do it for 5 minutes or a few minutes a day. Or if you get into a jam, you can do 1, 2, or 3 and just calm yourself right down. I did a couple of these before I started this talk. So going back to the whole independence thing. So we talked about the self-regulation thing and how it's tied to independence. And now I want to talk a little bit about holding the space when kids have conflict, right? Which is difficult to do, right? Because we don't want our kids to get into these conflicts. Sometimes we look at them as reflections of ourselves, like, how is this reflecting on me? I can't believe my kid's doing this. Trust me, I have kids of my own, I've been there. But when kids are in these situations, that's when they develop the tools. And think about even when we're upset and in the midst of something, it's not always going to make the most sense, right? Because you're always fun. So if you jump in and start, troubleshooting, then they're not going to have the ability to kind of sit in it when they need to. regulate themselves and figure out what the next best thing is. So after the regulation piece occurs, then they're better able to kind of, empathize with other people and put themselves in other people's shoes once they have their own emotional regulation down. So this is just a really cute little short on the importance of empathy and what it is, how it's different from sympathy, how we have to try and help our kids to be this way. And we could get better at it too sometimes, I think.
So what is empathy and why is it very different from sympathy? Empathy fuels connection, sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize the perspective of their truth, staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy business students do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I just think empathy is this kind of sacred space where someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, I need to be different. And sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, huh? No, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with community, I have to connect with something in myself that knows what I'm feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with release. I have it, yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's good, but I'm using it as well. We're trying to put the silver lining. So I had a miscarriage. At least you know you did. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you had a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things you do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversation is you try to make things happen. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I would really say, I don't know what they do so badly to me. Because the truth is, we can respond, make something happen. What makes something happen is connection.
Thank you. So yeah, so that's just kind of you don't have to jump in and get all like that's not the most important part. So I think that's just a great reminder of what's important, holding the space, not jumping in too quickly, and making sure that someone really feels understood. So we talked a little bit about, and hey, so I told you I was in school for a while, so I know that not everything is beautifully. Like sometimes you're going to tell the kid, hey, do this breathwork strategy, you got it dialed in. It's not going to beautifully. So I just want to talk a little bit about training. So for when I first started studying this and heard this word, it seemed like such a big word to me. Like, oh, that's not something that has happened to me. I am very fortunate. It was like I got all our judged, right? But it can happen in so many different forms, in so many different ways. So there's big T trauma, which I think is what people associate trauma with, and that's like the war. If you've been in war, you're a police officer, you see a lot of difficult things. But then there's also this little t trauma that can, and it kind of gets caught in that primitive part of your brain, the same way the big T stuff does. And so trauma, you can have trauma occur in your brain. You don't have any choice whether or not something's going to kind of get stuck there. And it's a body, it's in your body, it's in your brain. It's not a logical thing. So trauma can happen if you're a victim, obviously, if something really horrible happens, abuse, neglect, car accident, if you witness something, if you're related to someone that has something difficult happen, or even listening to the details of different things. So be glad for yourselves that you're not going through this, but something occurred when I was like in 5th grade. I was chased by a dog. And at the time, you know, it was just like very terrifying for me. And I didn't really kind of put that together in my head as trauma, but until much, much later. And, you know, I had some safety concerns about my girls. And when I kind of like tracked it back and kind of tied it to this period in my life, gosh, like I got some work, I got some processing that I need to do. Sometimes, and I'll talk a little bit about this. You know, I know I'm using a lot of animal examples in this presentation, but there's a great animal example for trauma. And so if you think of a lion going after something, like the lion's a predator going after prey. So it grabs a hold of an antelope. And it, you know, the antelope will go into fight and try and get away. So that is kicking and the lion shaking it on. Well, sometimes the animal will go into freeze. And then if that happens, the lion's not as interested, will drop it. It wants to kind of shake it up. The antelope goes into freeze. The lion gets disinterested and walks away. The antelope can get up, you know, great, I'm dead, and can just kind of go back to the herd. Nothing happened. Well, we can go into the freeze mode too. And sometimes it will resolve spontaneously, but other times we might need some assistance to help it resolve. And so EMDR is a way that you can kind of help resolve some of those things. And then another thing that happens is we have something that we don't quite process. It's like the thing with the human brain is we kind of create these narratives in our head about it. So these maladaptive beliefs that don't really serve us moving forward, that we kind of hold on to. So what we do is we kind of look for maladaptive belief that's not serving us in the present, that has kind of some roots to the past, and we try and reprocess it. And the reason why I like it is because it's fast, it's effective, it's evidence-based, and you don't, I feel like it's kinder because you don't have to talk about it as much. You use bilateral stimulation, which can be eye movements or tapping. So anyway, it was discovered in the 1980s by Francine Shapiro. It's evidence-based. More than 7 million people have been treated successfully in 130 countries since 2016. There's not as much talking involved. It's effective for all age groups. So with kids, you kind of make some of the techniques that you do while you're doing it, you can make it more concrete. You can do more drawings, things of that nature. And EMDR is the official organization for EMDR training. If you look it up on any old website, there'll be like, just like anything else, there's like a bunch of crazy stuff that comes up. But if you want the scoop on it, I would go to the EMDR website for that. And I feel like it kind of picked up popularity. There's some celebrities that started talking about their experience, and then I feel like it's just becoming more and more mainstream. So there are therapists I know in the area that do EMDR therapy. I know therapists that do it, and I think it's a great tool. It's not the only tool, but it's one tool that you can use. And yeah, I would recommend checking it out if you're curious. So we talked, yes. So it stands for eye movement it's desensitization reprocessing therapy. So okay, so what you do is you go back to an event, okay, that was distressing, and you will have body movement. So you can do hand movements. I have tappers in my office. They buzz right and left and right and left hand. And then there's like a series of kind of questions that I ask. So you're reprocessing in this grounded, safe environment. So you're back in the memory, but you're in the office with the therapist. There has to be some amount of trust established between the therapist and whoever's doing this. And so you go through this process, and then that's kind of how it works. And then the way it works is like, it's like when you're done, it's not like this thunderbolt happens to you, like, oh, thank you so much, none of that. It's like, how you know it works is you're like, wow, this just happened to me. And normally that would really bother me, but I know really it doesn't bug me anymore. That's how you think it works. It's really cool.
So you take them back through the whole story of the trauma, like
So
as you're doing the hand things?
So we talk about the sensory part of it. And I mean, there's kind of a lot to it, but we talk about like the scene, like what do you see, what do you hear, what are you feeling, what is your body feeling as you have a scene in your, and then you go back to it briefly. And there's different speeds that you can tap, and there's different duration, and so your therapist kind of helps guide that. And then you wait until that pain dissipates, basically.
So you keep tapping like the thing to get flickers or something as you're going through it.
Yeah, so like they buzz in the hand and just hold on to them. It's kind of a passive way of doing it. I like doing it because sometimes people's eyes hurt if you're going back and forth, or
So you could do it like this with that track as they're talking to you.
yes. So anyway, any other questions about EMDR? Yes. So, excellent question. So there's a single event, and then it's really kind of, obvious about what you're really complex. So, with that, it's like it takes a little bit more time to kind of pinpoint, and then you might kind of do multiple sessions. So you might resolve something, and then something else comes up. So you can do it with both kinds. Any other questions? See, like, I think it's so mainstream that I just assume that everyone here knows what it is. Thank you for bringing me back to reality here. So we're talking about trauma, and we're talking about universal needs, and we're talking about stuff, but I just wanted to end kind of on a positive note about it makes you resilient. Like it can be good, but you got to move through it. So this sign is actually hanging outside my office door, and the lovely Karen Webb, who runs the offices, I think she put this up, and I refer to it quite often just because I think it's such a cool quote. So it says, anything that annoys you is teaching you patience, Anyone who abandons you is teaching you how to stand up on your own 2 feet. Anything that angers you is teaching you forgiveness and compassion. Anything that has power over you is teaching you how to take your own power back. Anything you hate is teaching you unconditional love. Anything you fear is teaching you courage to overcome your fears. And anything you can't control is teaching you how to let go. That's Brian Weiss. Thank you so much for listening. I'm on LinkedIn if you want to connect, and then that is my website. So I really appreciate your attention, and I hope this was helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Online.
I have one question sent to me directly. How did you get a hold of you, LinkedIn, and then how did you able to get a hold of your presentation?
Sure, I can send that to Sarah. Can I do that?
Yes.
I can send that to Sarah.
On the website and make the link available. Cool. I'm just going to say a couple closing remarks. I want to thank Anne for her insights and her expertise this evening, and a big thank you to the Family Center, who's partnered with us tonight and throughout Mental Wellness Week. Please check out the resource table over here that Mary Jo has set up for us. And thank you all for coming out. I know everybody is super busy. We all have a million things going on. I appreciate that you are making mental health a priority for your kids and for yourself. And just thank you. If you have any feedback or future ideas, please let us know. And I hope you guys all have a great week. Thank you.
Online sorry.